So let's use, I don't know if Oscar Wilde is our paragon of morality, but yet some of his lines are good, and he uses the line, he says that in modern times, it's not that there's a higher rate of literacy or a lower rate of illiteracy, it's only that illiterate people know how to read. And in his cynical tone, he uses lines like, it's an age where people may know the price of everything but the value of nothing. Or you read more and more about less and less. It captures a very interesting, I would say, paradox, if not worse, dissonance, a very profound dissonance in our lives. You can have everything and have nothing. What do I mean by that? You can have all the wealth in the world, have everything that one would wish for, but lack self-respect, self-confidence, self-esteem. What type of life do you have? You can have intelligence, brilliance. You can be brilliant. You can be emotionally sensitive. You can have a warm soul. And yet, if you're lacking dignity, what kind of life do you live? So you could say, one second, I have everything. But here's the key thing. Having things and being something is very different. We often, in this life of this world of acquisition, especially in a fast food age and instant gratification, we replace, or we think we can replace, self-worth with net worth. If we acquire more, if I have more than someone near me has, my neighbor and so on, it makes me better. And people actually believe that. But in truth, it has absolutely no impact. You look at a material universe and you can acquire everything in this material world, including, I don't just mean materialism, financial and objects and so on, but even intelligence and emotions. But if you don't have inner dignity, an inner sense of respect for yourself, self-confidence, that you can take on challenges, all that is a gilded cage. You have all the gold and silver in the world, and it may numb you and it may protect you, but it can't protect you from yourself. You still will be nagged and will gnaw at you the lack of confidence that you have internally. Now, I'm not suggesting you can't have both together, but never think that one replaces the other. There are 4 personality types, archetypes, that define us all. Check out the description below, a course on the Kabbalah of the 4 elements. There's an interesting, a fascinating statement, a cryptic statement in the book called the Sefer Yetzirah. It's considered to be the first Kabbalistic mystical work, attributed to actually Abraham. Some say there's an earlier work called Raziel HaMalach, attributed to Adam. But the consensus is that Sefer Yetzirah is the earliest work. And there's a statement there where he talks about the cosmic order and the evolution of how existence came to be, from higher states of consciousness to this material state of consciousness, from a higher state of unity, as I mentioned, to a state of fragmentation and distinction and ultimately division, which will lead to divisiveness. And says there the following, Eses spheres bli ma. There are 10 spheres without substance. Bli ma. Eser v'loi tesha, 10 and not 9. Eser v'loi achad asar, 10 but not 11. I actually wrote an article right after 9/11, which happened here in New York and the United States. The attack of 9/11 is literally those words, 10 but not 9, 10 but not 11. Talking about this theme. You can look it up at our site, meaningfullife.com. So, when you say the word 10 but not 9, what is that saying? It's saying that 10 is the full picture, the full spectrum of a healthy psyche. And 9 is not. So what are the 10 and what is the 9? What's the missing one? We'll focus on that. Not 10 but not 11. That's another discussion. So in the mystical scheme of things, the mystical map, the DNA of existence, talks about the main building blocks that define all of existence. Just like you have in physics elements, and then you have molecules, and you have atoms and subatomic particles, which is a structure, it's a map. So we also have, and the human being, we have the DNA, and they're mapping the human genome. There's also a spiritual genome, the spiritual building blocks, and they're called spheres. In Hebrew, sphirot. Spheres, not necessarily the English word spheres as being like circles or sporadic objects, but spheres in the context of 10 types of energies, 10 building blocks. If any of you are familiar with my book on this Omer counting, which deals with 7 of the 10, 7 of the 10 are emotional. I'll spell them out. Love, its antithesis or counter force and balance is discipline. So if love is the flow, then discipline is the focus. If love is the gas, discipline is the brakes. And you need both in any healthy structure. Then comes Tiferet, which is compassion. Netzach, fortitude, ambition, determination. Hoid, humility, yielding. Yesod, bonding, foundation. And finally, the 10th. What's the 10th? Malchut. Malchut means kingship, but I'll define it in human terms as dignity. The top 3, I counted 7. The top 3 are the intellectual faculties. And we're talking here about the conscious faculties, not the superconscious. The conscious faculties. What are the 3 intellectuals? Chachma, Bina, Dat, which is the 3-step process in any cognitive process. And that is, first there's a spark of an idea, a resonating kernel that begins the process of the intellect becoming a state of conscious spark. Then comes Bina, which is understanding, fleshing it out, developing it into a full-bodied comprehension. And then comes Das, is sensing and saying, I got it. That's it. It's that the conclusion of a idea where it's not just an abstract idea detached, but you feel it within, it resonates internally, it's internalized. Sometimes compared to Chachma and Bina, the first 2 are sometimes compared to father and mother, and Das is compared to their union. That's why in Torah, sexuality is referred to as V'yoda, Das, because Das is connection. Das isn't just the father's seed and the woman's egg. It's not just the kernel of an idea or the comprehension. It's when it becomes a conception of a newborn idea that is fully integrated and internalized in the womb and begins to give birth to what will come, the emotions that follow, which are considered to be like the children. So there you have the 10 steps, the 10 building blocks. So 3 are intellect, 7 are emotional. Now what happens if you have brilliant Chachma, brilliant Bina, Das, you're a great conceiver of ideas, a great developer of ideas, even though usually one person doesn't have strengths in both areas completely. You have the Das, your Bar Das, a mature understanding of something in a very internalized and seasoned way. And you have love, and you have discipline. You have compassion, and you have determination, and you have humility, and yielding, and you have bonding. Sounds like a perfect human being. But if you don't have dignity, if you don't have the sense of malchut, sense of majesty, that I have value, and not in an arrogant way, that you are worthy of respect and worthy of honor because God put you here, then you're lacking everything. You have everything, but you have nothing. You have a great tool chest. Imagine a person has excellent tool chest, has the best tool chest in the world, has all the instruments, but doesn't know what to do with them, or doesn't have the confidence to know what to do with them. And another person may not have such a sophisticated tool chest and arsenal, but they have confidence in what they need in life, and they can take a little and change the world. So dignity is this thing which is very difficult to really capture in words. How do you define dignity? Love is definable. It may have its mystique, but it's something that you can see. I feel about dignity. And how do you gain dignity when you don't feel it? Now the truth is, it's our birthright. Everybody has natural malchus. However, in a non-nurturing environment, either at home or in society, or facing the hostility of a world of dog eats dog world, what can happen is that your dignity gets trampled upon, and you lose that respect either because somebody intentionally abused or assaulted your psyche and invalidated you time and again, or you're being humiliated at work or in your life, or just life itself has broken you, too many things that have just simply get to you. Very often we pick it up from our parents. If our parents have a weak malchus, very often they convey that to us. Again, that doesn't mean we're doomed. It means it makes it difficult because you then have a uphill battle to regain and reclaim your dignity, which is, of course, what we're going to be discussing at length. But first, let's define what it is. Now, Tisha B'Av. What is the connection to Tisha B'Av? The 9 days. That's exactly what happened in the 9 days. Especially in the Second Temple. What happened? It says there was sinas chinam, there was baseless hatred, there was fragmentation, more than fragmentation, there was divisiveness. People turned on each other. When you turn on a person, you're essentially assaulting their dignity. What happened was Malchus was being affected and ultimately became shattered. So the destruction of the temple, which we honor on the 9th of Av, both the destruction by the Babylonians and then the Second Temple by the Romans, a temple, what is a temple? A temple is, the Holy Temple was a bridge, an interface between heaven and earth. That's where heaven kissed earth. A physical building on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem where the divine presence dwelled. Beginning from the Bible, when it talks about V'osu le'migdash v'shachanti b'seicham, what does it say? It says, build for me a holy place, and I will dwell among you. But there's one big condition for this dwelling. You have to be a keli, you have to be a container. So, Barchenu avinu kolanu kecha, there's a statement, God blesses us when we're one. An analogy given for it by some of the Hasidic masters is, there's no greater joy that when a father, a parent, sees his or her children united. And there's no greater pain than when a parent sees their children fighting. Because then, how can a parent look and be present when their children are fighting among each other? So the temple's destruction wasn't just some punishment. It was cause and effect. You can't be together, you can't be brothers and sisters and love each other and be one. How can my blessing dwell among you? How can I dwell in a house divided? Obviously God can do anything he wishes, but it wouldn't work. So essentially divisiveness, the opposite of what I said before, tikkun, repairing and connecting the shards and connecting the shattered containers, created another shattering, the shattering of the temple, which symbolizes the shattering of Malchus. In Kabbalistic terms, the destruction of the temple is the destruction of Malchus. But when I say destruction, it does not mean complete, utter destruction. It means we still have the foundations are there, we still have the core spark, but the main structure was destroyed. And we have the remnant called the Western Wall. If you ever take a tour beneath the wall, you see the foundations in the ground, and we know this ground is sacred, we don't walk in it, and we wait for the day when the third temple will be rebuilt. And as many say, it will just have to be rebuilt only because it's already ready, but it only has to, the gates have to show them, the gates have to be put up. So the bottom line is it was not completely destroyed, but it was destroyed enough for us to have to go into an exile. What is exile at the end of the day? Exile is displacement. Yet another form of disconnection. Displacement. You feel displaced. You feel out of place. You feel like you don't belong. You're a stranger. And that's what we are in this material world. The soul is like a stranger in the material world. Material world that focuses on its own narcissistic, selfish needs, the animal soul, and all that comes with it. For the soul, this is a very painful place to be, because it's everything antithetical to what spiritual unity and divine pleasure is all about. However, the purpose of existence is for the soul to come to this earth with all its fragmentation and rebuild, repair the shattered psyche, repair the ruptures, the fractures of the malchus, of the dignity of existence. So dignity is really, of all the 10 spheres, dignity is the one that symbolizes most what makes us human. Intelligence is a tremendous and powerful instrument. Emotions and love can change worlds. But without dignity, you don't have the impetus. You don't have the drive. You don't have the sense of confidence to take on life. It's like saying, what do I need all this intelligence for? How many times have I heard this from people? What do I need all this brains and all my emotions if I can't have just a moment of peace within? I can't have confidence. I'm afraid of myself. I'm afraid of others. So dignity is where the greatest damage is done, but it's also the place that we have to focus on rebuilding. So what is Tisha B'Av? 10 minus 1. You may have everything, but you don't have the one Malchus dignity ingredient. And the repair of that is the work that we need to do, to fill that one, to return the one into the 9. And it's interesting, 1 is also Echad. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The most famous of liturgies, Echad, oneness. Oneness is exactly that. It's taking and finding the integral unity, the unified field theory. That oneness that connects everything else. So you can have, as I said, intelligence, you can have the entire circle, but you need to have the hub, the center. That's what creates the real balance. Now that's the work we have cut out for ourselves. So how, especially in our times, when we live in such, I would say, free times, with technology freeing us even more, prosperity unprecedented. And I understand people complain about their finances and so on, but on a collective level, there's never been such prosperity in the world, in the United States, in most of the people in most of the people in the Western world. Tremendous amount of prosperity and ease of life, standard of living, the comforts that we have available to us, with unimaginable years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And yet, when it comes to the issue of dignity, when it comes to self-value, self-respect, as I said, net worth may be there, but self-worth, that may be unparalleled lack, and unparalleled void and vacuum, which just amplifies the Tisha B'Av experience even more so than in previous generations. There are times when people are in a state where they, poverty or oppression, so of course that's a painful state, but they may have had internal dignity. When you have all that you need, food-wise, luxury-wise, the food's available to us. We don't eat just water and bread. Does anybody that you know eat water and bread? Does anyone live a life of such austerity? And yet, internally, we're hungering. You meet people who eat very well physically, who breathe air, who are healthy, who have many elements in their lives that are extremely... The minyan begins soon. You have people who eat very well, but you meet them, they're starving for love, they're starving for acknowledgement, they're starving for respect, and that is the ultimate Tisha B'Av tragedy. The loneliness, the lack, the abuse, the assault on the human dignity of our lives. So it's interesting, we live in a world, as I said, where I don't know if anybody knows someone that just eats bread and water. But there was a time where our ancestors just ate bread and water. And they were extremely healthy psychologically. Today, everyone eats more than that. That's just an example. We have all other types of luxuries and all other types of benefits. And yet you find a level of misery and a level of lack of self-value unprecedented. I cannot speak for millions of people, but you meet people, very few people you meet that do not suffer somewhere from some type of feeling that they've been invalidated, they've been stepped upon, they've been disrespected, and people get used to it. At some point, your threshold gets lower and lower because you begin to tolerate more and more, and it becomes expected. As much as, and I don't want to sound like a Marxist, as much as we may not like Marxist ideas, Karl Marx's ideas, but one thing he points out in his scathing critique of capitalism is the alienation that capitalism creates. The alienation that it creates, which is essentially the way he puts it. I think I mentioned once a number of times here. I had to deliver a paper at Cambridge University. They had an event which was called Affluence and Religion. And they had different speakers speak about the bridge. I was given the topic of money and spirituality. And so I did my research. I read my Marx, I read Adam Smith, and I read all the thinkers and the evolution of economic thought, which is very much connected to sociology and psychology and so on. Because at the end of the day, economics is about understanding human nature, how markets work, how people work, how people buy, how people sell, how people emotionally react to different market forces, etc. So when you read Karl Marx in his original papers, later it became a little more packaged, but in his original writings, there's a thing called the Paris manuscripts, I think of 1840 or something like that, where you see him in his original writing before he met Fred Engel, and before he was, as I said, he had his benefactors, as actually his capitalist benefactors in London, who were supporting his work in criticizing capitalism, mind you, which is, of course, one of the ironies. But talking about, everything has a positive side to it. His critique of capitalism essentially is that it destroys the spirit of the human being. Now, I remember finding a quote from him, and I decided to read it to the audience and ask people who said this. Now I've given it away already, but I read the quote. The quote said like this: that when, and he wrote in German, of course. So German is similar, has a lot of Yiddish words, or you can say Yiddish has a lot of German words, however you want to put it. But he writes there that that in the capitalistic system, what you have is an alienation on many levels. First of all, there's an alienation between boss and worker. The boss it's not an equal relationship. He writes your check, pays your salary, and you have to be subjugated to him. If he is going to be unfair to you, you don't have many rights. And you have to remember that capitalism was affected by Marx and socialist thought, so there was no concept of labor unions and workers' compensation and a lot of things that we have today, which are really socialist ideas that seeped in. Hardcore capitalism was not as gentle as it is today, if you can call it gentle. So he writes that first alienation is between worker and boss. Okay. Second is worker and worker, because people compete to climb the ladder. As a matter of fact, best friends can become enemies because the boss wants to play them one against another, and for them to climb, whoever's more successful will get the better raise, will get a promotion. Then there's the alienation between a person and the product they're creating, because with industrialization, it's not like you're working in the field and you see the fruit of your labor, the potatoes, the rice, the produce that comes through your efforts. You're producing products that you don't even need. You're producing products mass that are being used by others, so you don't even have a connection to the product that you're creating. It's all about the money that it produces, the capital it produces for the boss, and he shares enough to keep you happy, so you should continue producing for him. And then finally he writes the alienation between you and yourself. Because when you're at work, you're not at home, and when you're at home, you're not at work. Your most comfortable place is when you're at home, with your family, with yourself. And here, the workplace is not your home. It's a hostile environment. It may be pleasant, but it's still not your comfortable self. So your soul and your work are dichotomous. So I read this quote without saying who it was, and I asked the audience, secular audience, and I said, who said this? So they see me, so they said, one person said the Kotzker Rebbe, someone said the Baal Shem Tov, someone said a Rav Kook. Everyone came up with interesting, different things. Nobody guessed. So I said, it was Marx. So someone yelled out in the back and said, Groucho Marx? I said, no, not Groucho Marx, Karl Marx. And people couldn't, because with all, as I said, with all the critique, remember, his ideas are brilliant. The problem was he didn't have a viable alternative. What did he suggest in turn? That there's no privatization of the economy, of work, and everybody works equally, and everybody gets according to their needs. So you basically create one collective pot, and everybody puts the money into that pot, and then it's divided based on people's needs. You have 10 children, you get more. You have children going to school, you get allocated for that. There's one small problem. A lot of Jews and a lot of intellectuals were drawn to this because it was a utopian vision of a world where there's no competition, where everybody's working towards one goal and everybody's getting what they need. It sounds great idealistically, right? One small problem. Who's deciding what everyone has to get? Who's controlling the pot? Let's put it this way. So there was actually an argument. There was the so-called more radical, like the communist version of Marx, the Lenin, there's the Stalin version, and there was the more socialist version. The real extreme version said that we need to have what they call, that's what Marx writes, that there's a specter hanging over Europe, it's called communism. That the world would have to change entirely, because even if one person on earth that still owns private property, it undermines the whole system. You need everybody participating. But the problem is, how do you create a revolution like this overnight? So some felt you start slowly. Let's first take the Soviet Union, China, etc., and then you take over the rest of the world. Others felt you can't really bring communism into unless everybody agrees. So there's debates back and forth. But the question really is, till the transition takes place, who's going to watch over the private property? So what happened was, the irony of all ironies is that the abuse of individual power is abused by communism, nothing close to any capitalist. Because in truth, capitalism, yes, there's a certain unfairness. The wealthy are wealthy, the poor are poor. The wealthier become wealthier. They control and they manipulate, no question. But there is more than one wealthy. What happened in, for example, the Soviet Union? One Lenin, and then even worse, one Stalin. He controlled it all. So suddenly one man controlled everything. So how did it solve the problem? And he abused it to the fullest. He didn't give anyone individual rights, and he didn't share the money with everyone equally. So that means you can't trust a human being to suddenly control this pot. I'm not going to go through a whole analysis of Marxism, but the bottom line, a viable alternative he did not offer. So his critique stands, and it's good critique. And we see it playing itself out even in the United States. You know, the United States was not built by the founding fathers. They didn't build this country based on greed. They built it on all men are created equal, based on rights, based on spiritual rights, inalienable human rights. And that would create an environment. But once money becomes, people make money, that's what happens. They do become greedy, and it does become alienating. I mean, you ask anybody that's in this, especially in the financial world, they tell you it's complete shark. You do not have friends. You can lose your closest friends because it's all about making the profit and climbing. And to the point you do lose your soul in many ways. So Marx was correct. I wrote that paper I delivered in Cambridge is online if you want to read it. It's like a longer essay, several 6-part essay on what's the Torah's answer to this. Because you see, Torah does not advocate socialism. Torah does not say no private property, which is the cornerstone of communism, of Marxism. Torah says only the Levites, only the tribe of Levi did not have private property. But everybody else, absolutely. The land of Israel was divided. People owned property. And there's entire laws, entire tractates in the Talmud that talk about acquisition of property, exchange of property. The Torah's ultimate answer, since I'm already on the topic, I'll just say one briefly, is charity. It's tzedakah. That tzedakah, charity is the ultimate redemption. Charity is ultimately the answer. Self-imposed. Meaning that people have to on their own understand that it's God's gifts. But bottom line is, without God, you can't really have an economy that will be a fair economy. So both Marx has good arguments, and capitalism has its weaknesses, but you need to have the divine dimension, which of course Marx cut out by saying that religion is the opiate of the masses. So essentially he cut out the ultimate reason, the only way that really you can create an equality among a competition, a financial competition, which of course the argument of capitalism is that if people are not going to benefit from greed, they're not going to be driven to succeed. Why would I work harder if I'm getting anyway only a certain amount back? But getting back to our topic here, that is very true, money and the money markets and the acquisition of wealth to the point of obscenity, to the point even if you don't have it, people are running after it. They lohut, what's the expression? Odom lohut, achem amayim. A person is, it's hard to define. Lohut is a Hebrew word which means like obsessed, like almost a obsession with finance. Is no question is an ultimate assault on human dignity, because it means more money means you're more special. How many people have I heard this from? You know, I just a few weeks ago I was meeting someone. I mean, it's always painful to repeat these type of stories. And she's telling me about the abuse she grew up in a home. Father was a monster. He says, but he had money. So he was honored. And she said the worst possible day for her was when she had to go to the shul or to the dinner and her father getting honored and pictures and smiling and everybody's so happy. And she knew him to be a monster. So there's where you have clearly how the gilded cage, you smear a little silver and gold. You can take something that is completely, I don't want to use any expletives, but complete despicable individual, despicable behavior is something glossed over when there's some money. And how many people criticize that? And they say it comes to money. Everybody, where we all know in our minds, and we know from the Torah that wealth, even though Rebbe Machabed Ashirim, the Talmud says that Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, honored the wealthy, but as it's explained, he didn't honor the wealthy because he bowed to them, is because God blessed them with opportunity. So he honored that opportunity, but no way would compromise his values. Once wealth replaces, it creates the value that replaces true value, that's when the problems begin. But we live exactly in such a world. And if it's not wealth, it's power or influence or other external forces. So when you talk about Tisha B'Av, if you think about it, it's I don't like to say the word brilliant, but it's fascinating that almost 2,000 years ago, and then 2,000 and some years ago for this first temple and the second temple, both destroyed on this day, the 9th day of Av, and there's no accidents. Why on the 9th? Why not on the 10th? Why not on the 8th? Because the Sefer Yetzirah, as I said before, says 10 but not 9. And it talks about the building blocks of existence, or the building blocks of the psyche, is 10 but not 9. Now one little thing missing. What's missing? You can have all the intellectual qualities and virtues, Chachma Bina Das, which is wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, or sometimes the conception, comprehension, and internalization. You can have the emotions. You can have love in the fullest sense of the word, and discipline, and compassion. That's Chesed Gvura Tiferes. Netzach Chayid Yesod, which is determination, and humility, and foundation or bonding. But if you're missing Malchus, dignity, so it's like having the most sophisticated arsenal and army, the most sophisticated tool chest. You have all the brilliance and all the emotions. You can be a good person, a sensitive person, a kind person, a genius, but you're lacking one most important thing: self-respect, dignity, Malchus. You're lacking honor. And what do you have then? You really have nothing. What do you need? A tool chest with all the tools when you don't know how to really use them, you don't have the confidence to use them properly. Or you use them in ways that just are self-aggrandizing, self-building yourself, or covering up your lack of dignity with buying more things or hoarding. Remember, it's not no name, so there's no Lashon Hara, but I remember someone describing an individual that I met that was very obnoxious. And he tells me, I said, what's the story with this guy? He says he hides his ignorance with his arrogance. I thought it was a good way to put it. So we all are hiding things. When a person has no self-confidence, what do you think they usually do? They behave like they have a lot of self-confidence. How? By trying to control others. Why would someone need to control another person? If you're really confident with yourself, why do you need to control someone else? It doesn't make any sense. It's because you don't control over yourself, so you try to control others. I know it's always packaged in nice ways. I really care about the person, I have high standards, and I really want to impose it on someone else. But the need for control is a need for compensating for lack of inner control and inner dignity. It's a given. You can rest assured it's almost the case. There may be some exceptions. So what's happening here, so that's exactly what the Sefer Yetzirah says. 10 but not 9. Why does it have to say that? 10? 10 is a complete number, the complete structure. Misper HaShalom is called 10 as the mathematicians know. 10. Long before the metric system where they developed everything in the numbers of 10, units of 10, you have a sefer for Amunas V'Deis from the Rasag, and there's a sefer called the Milas HaYigoyin from the Rambam, where they talk about numbers, and they say number 10 is the complete number, which you see in Judaism. 10 commandments, 10 utterances, Asara Mamoris, 10 faculties, 10 spheres. The number 10 is the complete number. And there's reasons why. They explain how 10 is the complete. It's 3 times 3 plus the 10th dimension. So why is the Sefer says 10 but not 9? Because it's saying if you don't have the Malchus, you have Tisha B'Av. How could God rest on this earth? The temple was a beautiful temple. If you read the description of the temple, especially the second temple was even more beautiful than the first. And you see from even the Bible, you had to use the best materials. and gold, silver, and copper. And everything was created in a very perfect way. You know that in the temple, nothing was extra. There was no such thing as extra piece of gold. Everything was used perfectly because it was considered to be exactly what's necessary. Because that's what perfection is. Not more, not less. To the point, just as an aside, you usually see in synagogues the tablets, the Ten Commandments are engraved on 2 tablets. So most tablets, what does the image look like? They're round on top, right, and square on the bottom. Based on the Talmud, Baba Basra, it's clearly wrong, because it says there that the luchas oichelas es ha'aron, which means because in the temple nothing was extra space, since the ark for sure was square or a rectangle, but basically was a was a box without rounded spaces. So if the tablets would be round, that would mean there'd be extra space inside the Aron. And based on the Talmud, that echelas means that it reached in all directions, is like filled the entire space, you'd have to say that the tablets were squarish. Just as an aside. So the temple was built, the koved l'tiferes, that's the expression, to honor, beauty. Everything was there. Now, not because Judaism worships external, but because outer beauty is an expression of inner beauty. So we say, Yifas Toyar, Yifas Mara. Beauty, Zekeli Vanveyu. Beauty is considered a virtue, even physical beauty. If physical beauty is seen separate from inner beauty, then it's Hevel Achen v'Sheker Achen v'Hevel Ayefi. Then it's hollow, it's empty. What's external beauty? But external beauty, that is an expression of internal, is absolutely. That's why it's considered Yifas Mara when you say the imaz, the matriarchs were beautiful, both in the shape of their faces, the look of their faces. That's a quality. And then you say, do a mitzvah, you have to do it beautiful. A beautiful mezuzah, a beautiful Shabbos table, a beautiful Sefer Torah, a beautiful tefillin. I think it creates hadar. You take a beautiful fruit, citron for Esrog on Sukkot. So you have all this beauty, then suddenly Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, and then 490 years later, the Titus and the Romans go into this temple, they desecrate it, they destroy it, and the Jews are exiled. How is that possible? As I said before, it's not possible for only one reason. Because what's the beauty of this temple worth, God said, if you, my children, can't get along with each other? Sinas chinam. If you can't communicate with it, what do I need a beautiful home? How many people have I heard from grew up in unbelievable mansions and homes? They said it was loveless. It was lifeless. I came to our home. It had everything. We had everything we needed. But there was except one thing, no love. Nobody was there. I never saw my mother. I never saw my father. So what do I need this big mansion for? That's an example. A temple that became soulless because if the people can't get along, what God says, what's my point of resting among you? You have all the 9 beautiful faculties, but you're missing Malchus. And that's Tisha B'Av. So the 9 is not just some incidental day. It absolutely focuses 9, missing the 10th. It's missing Malchus. It has everything. The temple had everything, but one thing, I need people. God cannot rest in a place, dwell among us if we're not at peace with each other. That's the rule. That's how it is. So then began this long displacement called Golus, exile, with a purpose. It's not a purpose to punish. It's a purpose to repair. Now figure it out. There's a beautiful, this Shabbos, which is this year's Tisha B'Av, and we don't fast because of Shabbos until Saturday night and Sunday. But it's also Shabbos Chazon. Shabbos Chazon refers to the vision of Isaiah. Yeshayahu Hanavi, the vision that he had about the destruction, which we read in the Haftarah of this week. Now, Shabbos Chazon is always read the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, or on Tisha B'Av like it is this year. So that's Chazon. That's Yeshaya. That's why we call it Shabbos Chazon. Comes Lev Yitzchak Barditchever, and he has seemingly a contradictory take on it. Obviously, it can't be contradictory, but when he says, he says, What's Chazon? Chazon refers to every Jew is shown a vision on this Shabbos, is shown the third temple from a distance, and is told that it's in your hands to rebuild it. And he gives an analogy. He says that God is the father. A king, in the great love of his child, decides to give his child a gift. And what's the gift? A beautifully embroidered garment. Like a kshenis pasim, like Jacob gave Yosef. He doesn't say that, I'm just adding that. Okay, beautiful. And the child, of course, receives the gift, puts on the garment, and in a little time, 410 years, the garment is playing around and the garment gets torn, ripped. So God then goes, the father goes and gives him even a better garment. He has weaved for him even a nicer and more beautiful garment. And again, the child in his immaturity spoils and destroys the garment. So this time the father says, this is what I believe Yitzchak Baditchever's Moshel analogy. This time the father says, I'm going to weave for you even a better and a more beautiful garment, but this time I'm not giving it to you. I will show it to you once a year, on the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, or on Shabbos of Tisha B'Av. And when you'll see it, and you will yearn and aspire to have it, and you'll earn your way and pay your dues and not take it for granted like a spoiled child, but pay your dues and earn it, then I will give it to you, and then I know for sure it will never be destroyed again. That's Rabbi Yitzchak Baditchever's analogy. It's cited by Rabbi Hillel Parasher, who was one of the big Chabad Chassidim. And it's not surprising that Rabbi Yitzchak Baditchever would see the positive side to Chazon. Yeshaya saw destruction, and Rabbi Yitzchak Baditchever saw construction. Because that's how he generally interprets things. For example, where it says in Eicha, is it Eicha? Am Kovid Oven, a nation that is heavy with sin. So Rabbi Yitzchak Baditchever comes and interprets a nation for whose sin is heavy and difficult to do. And it's understood, especially when you study Hasidic thought, that this isn't a play of words. It's the deeper interpretation that you can read the same verse. On the surface level, you read a negative, but those with deeper eyes can read a positive, which is the common thing. You see people sometimes, you see children, teenagers who may be acting out or rebelling. So many people would see it as a negative, and someone with deeper eyes and more sensitivity can say, this person has certain strength. Let's figure out how to use that child's rebellion for a positive way. So it's not a question of two different approaches. It's not a question of a contradiction. It's just a question of how you see things. Now, this is not just a Hasidic, nice, cute idea. It's actually a Talmud. The end of Makos is a whole Talmud that talks about this, where Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues were looking at the Temple Mount. And remember, this is not long after the temple was destroyed. And Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues began to weep because they saw Shohalim, they saw a fox walking around in the holy ground where the temple stood, where the Holy of Holies was, once the Holy of Holies. And they see fox, it was like a wilderness. They see wild animals running around there. The worst possible. Even today, it's more or less like that. And Rabbi Akiva, and why are they crying? Because they say they see the fulfillment of the prophecy, of the vision of the temple being a place of wilderness, barren wilderness. And Rabbi Akiva began to laugh, and they said, "What are you laughing about?" So he says, because he sees the fulfillment of the end of the prophecy, that after the barren wilderness will come the redemption, and the Gula, and so on, and there will be the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash. So the end of the Gemara is Akiva nechamtani, Akiva nechamtani. Akiva, you've consoled us. Akiva, you've consoled us. So the obvious question is, what did he see that they didn't see? And why did he see it and they didn't see it? The answer is because you could look with the same vision, you could look at the same thing, and two people see something else. You look with a certain set of eyes, you see a building raised with a Z. and you see nothing there, you see destruction. And someone else may say, 1 second, they raised the building in order to build a better building in its place. Now Rabbi Akiva had that ability, he had the ability to see further. Why? Because he was Rabbi Akiva. Who was Rabbi Akiva? His name indicates it, like Akev, like Yaakov, the heel. He was either a convert or a child of converts. And we know the story that until age 40, he knew nothing in Torah, whatever the reason was. And then he went and he became the greatest Talmud, Kul Aliba de Rabbi Akiva, became, with a long story short, the greatest Talmudic scholar of all. Everything follows Rabbi Akiva. And he had the 5 great students, Rashbi, Rabbi Meir, and so on and so forth. So, Rabbi Akiva, because he came from darkness, appreciated, was able to see beyond darkness. Those that didn't experience darkness, thank God, don't see always the light within the darkness. And you see this inconsistently. Rabbi Akiva has the capacity to see in that fashion. There are more examples. It's not for right now. I'll give one more example. There's an argument between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, which is a very seemingly semantic argument that doesn't make any sense, ostensibly. They say that when the Jews stood at Sinai, so they were given positive commandments and negative commandments. Right? So what did the Jews respond? When the Eibishter said, Kabed es avicha, it's a positive. So they said, Hein, yes. Okay, everyone agrees. That's obvious. He said, yes, they agree, they accept. But what did they say when Hashem said, Lo signev? Or the other lawyers, do not do. What did they say there? So Rabbi Shmuel says they said no. Rabbi Akiva said they also said yes. Not yes, they'll do it. Yes, they won't do it. Rabbi Shmuel said they said no, we won't do it. Rabbi Akiva said yes, we won't do it. So what's the difference? What's the argument? Al hein hein, val lav hein, or lav lav. What does it mean? So one powerful answer, I heard this from the Rebbe. I'm sure there are many different answers, but this answer is and fits to their personality. Rabbi Yishmael was a Kohen Gadol. He lived in the light. He was a person of privilege. So for him, when he saw a positive is a positive, a negative is a negative, a yes is a yes, a no is a no. Rabbi Akiva lived in a world of no. He understood what darkness was. So he saw the yes even in the no. So they said yes. They didn't just say no, which means that the negative has a positive dimension to it. So they're not just arguing about words. Obviously, in both contexts, they wouldn't do it. But one is not doing it, avoiding it, and one is, by avoiding it, you are revealing a deeper light. So the point is that when you look at Chazain, Levi Yitzchak Berditchev looks at Chazain, so Yeshaya is speaking the vision that he sees. But remember, the end of the Haftarah is Sim b'mishpat tepodah v'shaveh b'tzedakah. It doesn't end with destruction. It says Zion will be redeemed with mishpat, law, Torah, and with charity, its captives will be freed. So Yitzchak Berditchev is saying, especially in the end of days, we're getting closer to the days of time of Mashiach, that we're shown the Beis HaMikdash, that's the Chazain, the vision. In order to what? Will elicit in us the gaguim, the yearning, the aspiration to gain that. You know, you show something to someone in order to awaken them a yearning for it. And that's the connection back to what I was saying before about dignity. So interestingly, it's not that 9, 10 and not 9, when you're missing that the dignity or the majesty, it's over. It's not over. A year like this, especially, even not a year like this, Tisha B'Av has a dual side to it. It's the darkest time. But you know, when is Mashiach born? The Medrash tells the story that the sages were traveling up north near Tzfat, near northern Israel, and they came to a farm, and it was the time when the Romans had begun burning the Beis HaMikdash. And it says an Arab farmer had a cow, and the cow began to groan, Gosa Parasa. And the Arab farmer, this is what the Medrash says, the Arab farmer in Echarab, the Arab farmer tells the sages, tells the rabbis, tells the Jews, your temple was just destroyed. The groan of the cow was sensing that something terrible had happened. So of course they were devastated. And then a moment later, a few moments later, the cow groaned again. Second time. And he says, and your Redeemer was just born. Mashiach, Neilda Mashiach, Mashiach Shal Yisrael. So of course the question is, what is this exactly? Which is, the Arizal says, that's why we say Nachem, Tisha B'Av in the afternoon by Mincha. Nachem is a consolation prayer. But we know that's when the flames were at their highest. The highest point was in the afternoon of the 9th of Av. Because in the throes of darkness is the birth of Mashiach, because there's no such thing as that devastation as an end in itself. Within the darkest moment comes the healing. Now this year, it's an interesting question when exactly all this takes place. Because Shabbos, we don't say Nachem.